All right, so
Hey.
The Circle. I've got Gregg Field here. Greg, I mean, you're unbelievable. You're 19 years old. You start touring with Count Basie, Ray Charles, Ella Fitzgerald. I mean, you're not even in your early 20s, I don't think, and you've already done what most people would go, okay, I've lived a good life. 10 different categories of Grammys, Latin Grammys.
Who's counting?
Nominations. Who's counting, right? You know who's counting? Nobody, because it's too much to count. You've been at the Apollo. You've done the Hollywood Bowl. You've been at Aspen Film Festival. You've been, at the Library of Congress. I mean, the amount of things you do is fascinating to me. And you always do it with such grace that it's like, just another gig. But I truly think the world will run out of talent before you'll run out of energy.
Sounds like I can't keep a job.
What I love about you most is other than the fact that, of course, you enjoy food so much too.
Oh, your food.
Well, thank you.
I mean, come on.
That's great about you. You do. You love the best of everything. So, we had our chicken chili today.
Oh my God.
And then, the roasted pumpkin seeds. I love the crunch that
Yeah.
into a salad, so you get some texture. The spinach is kind of creamy.
The little crunchy.
Yeah.
Well, also, I'm not a big cilantro fan, but you balance the cilantro with the lettuce.
Ooh, that was dangerous.
Right?
If you're not a cilantro fan, you still liked it. Because, I use the cilantro as part of the salad mix. So basically, it's cilantro leaves mixed in with spinach. But somehow they're like long-lost cousins.
Spinach, yeah.
They kind of hang nicely.
Yeah.
Too.
No, it was great. No, normally I hate cilantro. It's like soap. Like my father-in-law couldn't stand it.
But it's a real thing, by the way. They say that there literally is a chemical like DNA thing where some people, the reaction in their mouth literally creates a flavor of soap.
But I didn't get it. I swear to God, I'm not blowing smoke. I didn't get
put
it.
some degreaser in the dressing.
Man. Yeah. Right. Oh, let's go with that.
But that's what I love. But I think it's fascinating. So, the whole idea of this podcast is I truly want to leave people better than I found them. I really believe that everything in life is not about what happens because you can't control it anyway. Things are going to happen. Maybe you'll tell the story of, how you got in with Count Basie, but it's the reaction. It's what you do with what happens that makes, people thrive. But I think a lot of people suffer from kind of focusing outside of that circle and it just brings them down. So what I'm curious with you as a wild success and all the people you've had the pleasure of working with and thriving with, does that make any sense? Have you seen how somebody's ability, we can start with you, is the circle and control something that makes sense to you in your life? And with Monica, your wife, do you find examples of where you've lost or thrived because of that?
100%. But when because I'm hearing this expression for this, nomenclature for the first time, I suppose. When you think of something as being outside of the circle of control, well, what does that obviously imply? That if there may be something you want that's outside of that circle, and maybe you fear not being able to bring it into your circle, right? Well, for me, when you include fear is for me is a belief system, and it tends to push things away. So what I find is that something I'm passionate about, I've learned not to need it.
Wow. I love that.
Yeah, because need brings an entirely different set of choices that you might make. Because it's like, if I don't get this, if I'm not able to pull this in or that in or get this job or whatever, I find that tends to push things further away.
God, you're good. I've never heard anybody say that, and I really like that. Need makes you make decisions you wouldn't have otherwise made.
100%.
Less quality ones.
Oh yeah, you're making decisions out of fear. You referenced how I got Count Basie's gig. For those of you that don't know, Count Basie was like a Duke Ellington in the 20th century. Right. Probably had the most successful big jazz band of them all. Sinatra recorded with him, Ella Fitzgerald recorded with him. They were the gold standard. So it was an all African American band of 18 guys.
Wow.
That did over 300 concerts a year.
Wow.
And had been together a very long time. Yeah, almost, exactly. So I heard the band when I was 10 years old at Disneyland. I'd been playing drums for about a year. And I literally, the hair stood up on the back of my neck. I was seeing something that I literally had a physical reaction to music, right? Okay. Nobody else around me was having this reaction. I'm thinking, wait, why am I freaking out?
I love
right?
That.
And I was like, it's like, is everybody hearing this? So
their cotton candy.
Right, exactly. So I asked my dad to buy every Count Basie record he could find, and I would come home.
10-year-old, give you every Count Basie record.
And he did. And I would come home from my high school or junior high school, elementary school, and practice to these records over and over and over. And I could sing every trumpet part and every trombone part and every sax part. I knew the drums, what they were doing, and I would try to do them. So this went on for 7 years.
7 years.
Yeah. So I'm a senior in high school, and we had a really great jazz program. And I grew up in the East Bay, outside of San Francisco, right?
Nice.
So it's December of 73. I'm 17. I'm a senior in school. And I read in the newspaper that Ella Fitzgerald and Count Basie and his band are going to play for a week at this theater. And I asked my dad, I said, can I go every night? And he said, sure.
So your dad was that supportive.
He was great. He was a surgeon. My mom was a nurse, but if you wanted to go after music, do it. Complete 100% support. So I would drive to the theater, concerts at 8. I would stand there at 7:00 outside the stage door, and the band bus would pull up, and the guys would get out, and I recognized every one of them. So and this is a crazy story, but I swear to God it's true. So I did this Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Saturday, they were going to do an earlier show and a later show. And my girlfriend and I were going to go to dinner and go to the later show. Coincidentally, which I don't believe in coincidence, but what it will appear as coincidence, she called me that afternoon and she said, I'm not feeling good. And I thought, well, I've got nothing to do. I might as well go to the early show. So that night, I'm standing out there like I had every other night, and one of the guys in the band stops because I'm doing total fanboy, geeking out, right?
Who is this guy?
Right. And so he said, you work here? And I said, no. He said, well, why are you out here every night? I said, I'm just a big fan of the band. I'm a drummer. I'm Gregg Field. He said, yeah. He said, I'm John. I said, I know. You're John Calvin Williams. You're from Greensboro. You joined the band in 1970, and you play baritone sax.
Dude, I want to see that movie. You
oh, man.
Movie on
well, it's pretty, well, where it ends up, maybe so. So he said, well, why don't you come back? So I'm in the green room of this theater, and there are all these.
Just shaking uncontrollably?
I pretty much am. And I'm looking, and there's Eddie Lockjaw Davis and Freddie Green, the famous guitar player, Al Gray, trombone player. Anyway, Basie hadn't shown up yet. He was coming by private car. So it's about 5 minutes before the concert's going to start, and the band is assembling in the wings. And up comes Basie. And John said, what's your name? I said, Gregg Field. He said, Basie, this is Gregg, and he's a drummer. Now, I don't remember what we said to each other. All I remember was that he was really warm. And so the band goes on stage, and they're about to introduce Count Basie. And the manager comes up and said, Sonny Payne's not here, to Basie. Sonny Payne was the drummer.
Oh, my God.
I swept my hand to God.
The rest of your life, you should thank the girlfriend and
and this guy.
These two people changed your life.
100%. So Basie said, "Did you say you're a drummer?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You want to play?" And I said, "Yeah." So I walked out on stage, and I got to tell you, when you're a musician, you're traveling on the road, you meet a lot of really whacked people. So I have to think the guys in the band are going, "What is this kid doing?" Right? Coincidentally, I showed up in a gray suit. The whole band was wearing gray suits. And I sit down.
But see, again, that's you putting it out there.
I'm telling you. Well, that's where I'm going to get to this.
You were already part of the group.
Well, I wanted to be, but I didn't need to be.
There it is.
And this is what I'm going to get to. No, because here's the reason that me playing with this band was not even something I was considering. Because probably the youngest guy in the band was 40, all African-American guys, and the absolute elite of the jazz world. I mean, this was the gold standard gig.
And no offense, or not to get down a wrong path here, but that wasn't exactly the time where they would be thrilled to bring in this white kid.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. Right? They would be. Oh, 100%. As a matter of fact, we can talk about that. But Duke Ellington hired his first white musician in 1951. It was a drummer named Louis Belson, who was my teacher and my mentor. And yeah. So no, those guys operated from a different planet. Right. And so I walk out, I sit down, and I said to this trombone player, I said, "Where's the music?" He said, "Well, we don't pull the music out. The drummer knows it." And right at that moment, I hear, "Ladies and gentlemen, Count Basie." And Basie walks out, and he sits down, and he starts to play a song, Jeff, that I'd played in my bedroom hundreds and hundreds of times. I got this. I played the whole set. All right? So... and Basie introduced me at the end. He had me stand up. He said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I don't remember this young man's name, but he said he just came out and helped us out." And while we were on stage playing, I look over in the wings and there's Ella standing in the wings, just watching and grinning because somebody went back and told her, some kid on the high school kid is playing drums, right? So I needed a little bit more seasoning, or a lot more. So I moved to LA and I got Ray Charles's gig. I toured with Harry James. I started working with Herbie Hancock, and it was 7 years later, and I was at my little apartment in West Hollywood, and my phone rang, and it was Count Basie's manager, and I became the youngest musician that he ever hired in his entire career.
Wow!
And within a year, I recorded an album that went on to win the first Grammy album that first time I played on it won a Grammy. I did a TV special with Frank Sinatra called The Man and His Music.
And he became Sinatra's...
Well, this is where I'm going with this, yeah. So, and then what else? There was one, and in December of 81, at the Kennedy Center Honors, they were honoring Cary Grant, Helen Hayes, Rudolph Serkin, Jerome Robbins, and Basie. And Basie's band was going to perform on the Kennedy Center Honors. And the host of the Basie segment was Henry Mancini. Now, now I'm going to draw the line. I'm going to draw the line. So I end up as Basie's drummer. I spent 3 years with him, did almost 1,000 concerts.
Wow.
Ended up
1,000 from being the kids.
Yeah. Probably somewhere between 900 and 1,000 concerts, somewhere in there. Probably closer to 900. But anyway, a lot.
And now we know that's only 3 years worth.
That's 3 years worth. Because we were always on the road. Yeah. There was no tour. You took a couple weeks off in July and a week off at Christmas. Otherwise, we're doing 5 or 6 nights a week. Wow. And all over the world, right? So I end up leaving Basie, and I got offered a teaching position at USC, and I wanted to start working in the LA studios. And then Ella hired me. And I spent a couple of years with Ella until she had a heart attack on the road. So she retired. And then my studio career started taking off. And then I got a call from Frank. Now, here's where it gets really crazy. So I was Frank's last drummer. The last 5 years he toured. I did the duets records with him. And then I end up marrying. So at the Kennedy Center, Henry Mancini sees me, and he comes up to me and he said, "Wow, kid, you got the greatest job in the world. You're Count Basie's drummer." And I thought, and I'm like 25 years old, right? I thought, man, Henry Mancini's talking to me. Now, if everybody out there doesn't know who Henry Mancini was, he wrote The Pink Panther, Moon River, 18 Oscar nominations, 73 Grammy nominations. 73 Grammy nominations, won 20, won 4 Oscars. Anyway, now when I look back, I ended up marrying Henry Mancini's daughter. I ended up working with Ella, working with Frank. And this was a very long answer to your question about not putting need into the equation. Because the likelihood of a young white guy from San Leandro, California, getting the most coveted job in jazz was nothing that you would even let into your, oh my God, someday. There was no someday. I never thought it would happen. So when it happened, I came to it quite purely. It was something that I was passionate about, but I didn't need. Now, I've had gigs that I thought, oh man, if I don't get that gig, I'm going to be really disappointed. But cut to all these years later, it's been 50 years now since that night.
So it sounds like that's a great example of you didn't focus on what was outside your control, which was where will this lead? How can this be?
Not at all.
Sounds like you just showed up and played.
I did. And I believe that because I use it as a technique now, I don't find there is coincidence. There is what you experience in the conscious awareness, physical awareness. There's past, present, future. There's, there is what appears to be coincidence. But when you start digging a little bit deeper into what's the unconscious mind doing, what's the subconscious mind doing, how is that impacting what I've experienced, and it's completely reasonable to me now after 50 years of this kind of thing happening, is that where I put my passion and my attention, doors start flying open. And when the door doesn't fly open, I now trust that. I never let need come in. That's
like the best example of the circle. I trust that. You're just letting it exist. You're
yes.
Not forcing anything in or outside of that.
Don't force a thing.
I like that statement. I trust that.
100%.
Not I accept that or I'll deal with that, but I trust that.
Yeah. I'll give you a great example of this. So we're celebrating Henry Mancini's 100th birthday.
Right.
And I recorded an album.
You did the TV show too?
We've got a PBS Great Performances that starts airing on November 29th. But the first song we wanted to record was Peter Gunn. And, da 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 da, right? So that won the first Grammy for Album of the Year for Henry Mancini. And the piano player on that track in 1957 was John Williams.
Wow.
Star Wars, he was Henry Mancini's piano player. He played on Pink Panther, Moon River. That's John. So my wife called John and said, hey, John, you want to come in and re-record your part? He said, sure. So I called Quincy Jones, who I'd worked with for years, said, you want to conduct? He said, absolutely. Called Herbie Hancock, you want to be the other piano player? He said, absolutely. Called Arturo Sandoval, said, you want to be in the band? Yes. So a friend of mine knows Dave Grohl from Foo Fighters.
Right,
and Dave's a great drummer. And I thought, man, if I could get Dave Grohl on this track. Well, we put the word out to him because we have a mutual friend, and he wouldn't say yes, he wouldn't say no, he wouldn't say yes, wouldn't say no. And finally he said no. And I was initially disappointed. Now, if I didn't trust the way things can flow, I might have been, trying to figure out another way to get to him, right? Play some more cards. But he said, no, okay. So now we make the recording. And if you want to see it, you can go to CBS Sunday Morning. If you Google CBS Sunday Morning Mancini, you'll see the session. And here's what I hadn't considered. John Williams and Herbie Hancock and Quincy Jones had been friends for 60 years. And had they ever been in the studio together? No.
No way.
Not the three together recording. Dave Grohl doesn't know any of those guys. So if his energy had come in,
changed everything.
It would have changed everything, and not for the better.
Interesting.
Right. So I didn't know that was going to play into it until after we recorded it. I went, as great as it would have been musically, it probably wouldn't have reached the heights that it did because there were no strangers in the studio. These were people that love each other, have known each other for many years.
Energy and the interaction is everything, right? That brings it all to life. Like a great photographer, there's a reason why one gets a different picture than another. It's the energy they create in the interaction. It's still the same camera.
Oh, and to watch the hardcore studio musicians, because it was a band of about 18 of us, I guess 20 of us, to watch their reaction, and this is the cream of the crop, the LA guys, to see these legends standing at the podium. And we had just come out of COVID. It was really emotional. And man, the emotion is in that track. And CBS Sunday had cameras on it. And November 29th,
can't wait.
PBS, Great Performances, we were going to show that entire session.
And you put that together. That's what's
yeah.
But you said something earlier that I want you to go in on more. You made me think about the circle differently because a lot of times I frame it as, hey, like outside the circle is the war in the Middle East. Okay, we can't affect that, so why are you going to let it bring you down and, affect your energy and everything else? But you gave me an interesting twist that I liked. Fear can stop people, correct me if I got it wrong, but you said fear can stop people from reaching outside the circle to something they think is outside the control that they actually could have in their life. Is that right?
100%.
So give me some examples or thoughts on that.
Okay.
I love that concept. Don't let fear be this Berlin Wall of the circle.
The trust part and the removal of fear in your day-to-day decision-making, I find that the fear tends to put you on a very myopic path of, I want to get from A to B, or I want to possess B, whatever it might be, the thing that you might fear not owning or getting to. And it tends to put you on a path to find that's the door I want to go through. Well, maybe that door is opening over here and opening over here and opening over here, but your fear is limiting you. It's again putting you on a very narrow path of, this is how I'm going to get to this. I'm going to get Dave Grohl to show up. I'm going to get him to show up. When somebody back here saying, hey, you're going to have a much better session if that doesn't go in that direction. Well, by the time, after 50 years of living this, it's easier for me. Listen, there's still stuff I want.
Yeah,
and I want this new Aston Martin, and I can't afford it. But it's the need doesn't come in anymore.
And I love the fear angle as well, because you're right. The fear can just make you blind. Like you're so fearful.
Yeah.
On the outside, it looks like motivation or drive, but the truth is, the way you're saying it, which makes a lot of sense, is it's actually you're so afraid of not getting it,
right,
that you're doing things, saying things, going places you don't need to go that might end up being worse anyway.
I had a teacher, I just remembered this, that put it in very simple terms. You're standing at a stoplight, and the light turns green, and you want to walk across the street. Okay, the person without fear sees the light turn green and looks both directions and walks across the street. The person with fear, the lights turn green, they look both directions, and they're still afraid to put their foot out. Oh, I might get hit. Even though it's green and there's no cars coming.
Right.
So that's another way of looking at this, is the fear paralyzing you.
Yeah.
But really, for me, it's the fear blinds you from opportunity that may be a little bit further down the road.
Yeah. And that's how I feel about optimism too. I think I annoy some people because I'm like the endless optimist, but I really believe that when you're an optimist, you don't pay attention to challenges that other people won't step off the curb for over and over and over.
100%.
You just believe it's possible. You end up achieving things, right? I mean, great things don't come from lack of belief. They come from, beautiful optimism, but there's else, of course.
Normally I've had a few guys in my life that were great teachers, and they weren't trying to teach, they just did.
Well said.
And I had a thing that came up a couple years ago with a friend of 30 years, a colleague, very close friend, that made a really bad business decision that affected me really negatively.
Oh, interesting.
And it was a trust issue.
Wow.
And the knee-jerk reaction of me 30 years ago would have been, go F yourself and throw away a 30-year friendship and blah, blah, blah. Total reactionary. Right? And I called Norman on the phone because he knows this guy. And I said, what would you do? And he said, over and next. And
just like that.
Yeah, didn't have to think about it. Over and next. And I initially took that to mean, okay, over, you're done with them, whatever's coming next. No. He called me the next day and explained it to me. He said, over is over the anger.
Get over it.
Right. He said, it's not doing you any good. He said, the next is, why don't you make decisions that'll create positivity with this person? So it was a challenge because I wanted to say, go fuck yourself. And we were, because we spent so much time together, musically and away from music, I knew I was going to have to deal with him. And I was literally sitting, watching this guy walk toward me, and I thought, and I had a couple choices I could make. And I could kind of play, hold back a little bit. And I thought, next, what do I want next? If I could have anything the way I want it, I want my friend back.
I love that.
I want to hug him.
Yeah.
So I went up and hugged him.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And he knows that I know.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That he fucked up.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
But it's a case of, do I want to have some sort of punishment in our relationship? And, Quincy died 2 days ago.
Right.
And Quincy was one wise, incredibly wise man. And if you go on to Facebook, it's on his page. But it was an interview with him 2 years ago. And he talked about a very famous composition teacher named Nadia Boulanger. And she was from Paris, and he studied with her in the 50s. And she was a classical composition teacher. And she was a really wise woman. A lot of very famous people studied with her. And she said to Quincy, you're only going to make music as good as who you are as a human being.
Wow.
And so he brought that up. And then he said, and he's sitting in this chair, and he said, I'm working on getting rid of all anger in my life. He says it's toxic. And he was going like this. It doesn't do me any good. And he said, I don't need revenge. I don't need any of that. And he said, I'm getting it out of my body. And that coupled with Norman's line,
Bravo.
yeah.
Those are great lessons.
Right.
That person, are you still friends?
Oh, well, yeah, of course.
See, and you've done
Of course.
things together?
Since then, yeah.
Good for you. Isn't it funny? Good for you. Because, like, our ego will kill us every time.
Ooh.
You know, I always say, like, I haven't found anything in my life to be less valuable than being right.
Oh.
It never gets you anywhere. You know,
yeah.
It ruins friendships. It makes people feel bad. You know, right doesn't help anybody. Get to the right place. And that's what it sounds like you did with that.
It wasn't easy.
Right would have been, you apologize.
Right. Yeah. Oh, no.
You owe me, you know.
Well, how about look in the mirror and say that every time that I did something stupid, right?
Dude,
and the thing is,
more. That's such a good attitude. Start with like what I can do better.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm at the point now where, you know, that you make stupid decisions and they're fear-based. And this was true with this guy. He wanted something really bad and he went around me to get it. And it wasn't cool. Right? All right. Have I ever done anything like that? Hell yeah.
Yeah, we all
So, right. So, you know, I don't feel like I need to do that anymore. As a matter of fact, it's exactly the opposite.
Yeah.
It's that if something's not coming, I trust, hey,
like,
move on and see what happens.
Said, isn't it great? Because you're the one that's being tortured anyway. You know, that's the irony of all this stuff.
That's what Quincy said, yeah.
Not to get political, but even with this election stuff, the more angry and bitter you stay, it's only hurting you. You know, you're not hurting anybody else with all the dialogue. It's like,
it's so true.
We just gotta love and be kind because you're the one that suffers otherwise, and it doesn't solve anything. So it's a double negative, you know.
You know, it's interesting you bring with the political thing. Obviously, we have people that we love that they're on the other side. Okay,
yeah.
Right. So, a colleague of mine yesterday on Facebook, a really fantastic percussionist. I have no idea if he's a Republican or Democrat or we voted for, but he said, we need to move on with our lives and do what we do, which is making music. And I thought, oh, that's kind of perfect. Yeah. So Monica and I, my wife, we're news junkies. We get up in the morning, we're turning on MSNBC or CNN, so that's the side we're on, right? Okay. And it's on all day and into the night, and because we're political junkies.
But dude, you're like one of the exceptions because I got to tell you, I preach and I practice it, zero news. Because I always joke that I have never met somebody that can give me an example of how their life is better or something's better because of taking in news. But I would have never pegged you as that person because you're always joyful, you're always light, so you have an incredible ability to be a human filter, process, let it go, let it pass you. But most people that watch news like that, it just makes them heavier and heavier and heavier because it's just like brainwashing, right? Like I say, I get up in the morning, I read my my peaceful stuff and all the stuff that, starts my day, right? If I woke up to the news, I think I would just like want to jump off a bridge. You know?
I get it. It's a lot of, I know a lot of the players.
Right.
Some of the higher players. And, I was really disappointed yesterday.
Yeah.
Right. Heartbroken.
Yeah.
But Monica and I both made a decision. We're not going to turn on any news. And I've just got to get to a place of trust.
Yeah.
And I'm not there yet, but I will be.
Because isn't it funny? Like knowing doesn't make anything better. Like I know more experts of January 6th or whatever, both sides. And it's like, okay, what's changed? Nothing.
Right.
They're just heavier. They're more frustrated.
Yes.
It's really interesting. Yeah. It's I call it expiring information, right? Like when you put your love and passion into music, into producing, into being with your wife, into spending time with friends, into cooking, those things are lasting. News is expiring information. It really has almost zero value.
Here today, gone today.
Yeah, really. Interesting. So who's somebody you've worked with? Because again, this guy's list of people you worked with there's almost nobody left for you to work with, I don't think, unless, they're either dead or they're not famous yet. Who's an example of somebody that you already talked about a couple great examples, but who else did you watch and say, wow, they had such an incredible ability, if you can think of anybody, or somebody, don't say their name, that wasn't able to do it and you watched them suffer as a result? Be able to
musically, their talent?
Yeah, their career, their decisions, their talent. How did they stay in their circle of control and not get bogged down and to either excel or not?
Music's a wonderful place for pushing the rest of the world away when you're making it, but it always doesn't work. I'll give you a really funny example. But for me, I love working with singers. That's my thing. And I produce singers. And for me,
throw out a few. You've done Bublé, right?
Oh, I've done tons of albums of Bublé, Gloria Estefan, obviously Sinatra, Ella, Luther Vandross, Aretha Franklin. I mean, it goes on. Yeah, it's I've worked with a lot of singers, but Frank put it more succinctly than anybody. He said, "I never let my singing get in the way of my storytelling," and for me, when I hear somebody sing, in a perfect world, it's like they're opening up a window and letting you see inside of who they are.
Wow. I never let my singing get in the way of my storytelling.
And I'll give you a great example of that. So Frank recorded a song in the 50s called One for My Baby, and he called it a saloon song. And it's about a guy sitting at a bar, and it's 2:00 in the morning, 2:45. There's no one in the place except you and me. And set him up, Joe, talking to the bartender. I've got a little story I think you should know. So Frank recorded this thing, and we did it at every concert. So now, cut to all the years later, 40 years later, 30 years later, we're recording that same song with on the duets record, Frank Sinatra duets, which I played drums on. And Frank sounded really old on that track.
Interesting.
And and people would always say to me, "Gee, he doesn't sound like he did in the 50s. He didn't.
He's older.
But here's what I figured out, thanks to Phil Ramone, the producer. So we'd finished recording it. Frank had all of his parts done, and they were mixing it. And we were over at Capitol, and anytime somebody would visit the studio, they want to hear some of the album. Right. And Phil would always play One for My Baby, the track where Frank sounded really old. And one day I turned to Phil and I said, "Man, he sounds really old on that track. Why do you always play that one?" And he said, "Gregg, you don't get it." He said, "In that vocal is 50 years of whiskey and Ava Gardner."
Wow.
And it's like, Jeff, the heavens opened up. And I went, oh my God.
It was the epitome of the story.
Right. And so I learned that it's the antithesis of The Voice or American Idol, where somebody holds a note really high and loud.
Right.
Right. Well, that's a circus act.
Bravo.
What I want to do is become emotionally involved in music. Frank was that way. I'll tell you the singers I've worked with that did it better than anybody. Tony Bennett, Luther Vandross, Frank Sinatra, Ella Fitzgerald. And whenever they sang, they were somehow wired not to be distracted, and they were in the story. And two of the opposite examples of that are Billy Joel was performing at Madison Square Garden, which he did all the time. I think he just did his 100th performance there.
Right.
So he said on some interview, "I'm never going to sing Just the Way You Are again." And the interviewer said, "Why not?" He said, "Well, I was on stage in Madison Square Garden." And he said, "I was staying at the Waldorf or something, right?" And he said, he's on stage, he's in the middle of the song. And he sings, "Don't Go Changing." And he thinks to himself, I wonder what time room service stops at the Waldorf to try to please me. Shit, I think it's at midnight. Oh. And he said he realized he was so disconnected. And he said, I can't go up there and sing a song that I'm disconnected with. And there was another singer that I'm not going to mention who it is, but we were doing a concert at Royal Albert Hall in London. And the song was this really heartfelt song about coming out of a very dark period in their life.
Right.
And we were in the middle of playing it, and they were standing at the front of the stage singing these break your heart lyrics, smiling and shaking hands with the fans in front while they're singing.
That's such a disconnect,
and I thought,
right?
A complete disconnect.
That must have felt so insincere. How
completely.
Weird.
And everybody remembers Frank Sinatra's My Way, right?
Yeah, of course.
Frank used to love to grouse about it. I hate that song. I have to blah, 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 blah. Well, realize most of the time I was looking at Frank's back while everybody in the audience is looking at his face.
Right.
So at least half the time, Frank would turn around after singing My Way, and there would be tears coming down his face, and the audience didn't see it.
Wow.
But 1992, 2 weeks before the Olympics, we were in Barcelona in one of the stadiums arenas that were built for the Olympics, and they shot it for TV. And you can go on YouTube and you can see, you go just put in Frank Sinatra, Barcelona, 1992, My Way. And we were behind him. Frank finished singing it, and he turned to his left, and there was a camera directly on him, and he starts losing it.
Wow.
And so the long answer to your question was, those people, and most of us that make music, when we're actually doing that, we're completely not distracted. And you mentioned something earlier, which is if I had to pick one thing I'm most passionate about in my life, are race relations. Because I've lived in the African-American music world most of my life. And with rare exception, I've never felt separated from anybody.
Yeah.
And I've never been made to feel separated.
I've always felt that about you. You're truly colorblind, if there's such a thing.
Well, I just and Norman Blair was exactly that way. And Norman said one time, somebody interviewed him, and he said, I feel like whoever I'm with, whatever tribe, I'm part of that.
That's awesome.
I don't feel disconnected from anybody.
Well, that's
I just don't. I'm not wired that way.
Yours because you find connection. You do. You're just naturally interested in common ground in a positive way, in like a fulfilling way, which is so beautiful. When we're together with Chris, you guys have your music thing, and it's so clear. When we're talking, it's the food thing or it's the travel thing, and it's beautiful.
But it's as I get older, I don't find the need to have a get to know you period.
Yeah.
It's like I can talk to a waiter like I've known him 20 years, right? But that came from Norman, and Norman was the most amazing human being I've ever encountered. But one time we were at a restaurant, and the waiter came over and said, "How are you, Mr. Lear?" And Norman said, "Happy to see you." It wasn't a flip comment.
Right.
He meant it.
Yeah.
And I watched him live his life that way.
Right.
And I thought, I want to be that guy.
Well, you are that guy. So I remember we were at, what was the restaurant? It was the guy that's a sound studio.
Verse.
Yeah, Verse.
I'll be there tonight.
Verse, yeah. Great restaurant in LA, Verse.
Yeah.
But I'll never forget, you did the same thing to that waiter. The girl, you acknowledged where she was from, and you started throwing out a few words, and she felt so acknowledged in a sincere way. And then that was the best story ever. With that, you were so kind and sincere to have that waiter have a taste of the wine. Remember? And
of course,
it was a gift, and he took the whole bottle.
Oh my God, I forgot about
priceless.
that. Yeah. Hey, you got to try this wine. And the guy did.
Thank you. That's
Thank
so
you.
nice. I'm off tomorrow night. I'll love it. And you were like so gracious. You were just like, enjoy.
Yeah. Why
it
not?
was so obvious that wasn't. So
we're probably having more fun laughing about that than if we'd had the wine that night. So there's trust.
Yeah. And thank goodness it was your wine. So you
yeah.
More of it. So is there, at your young age of amazing experiences in life, is there anything what is your still personal goal for you? What is the thing that you are still would love to say, I want to get that done, or I want to,
Well, I've made, I spent the last 2 years making this tribute to my father-in-law record and this TV special. And we've done, we opened the Hollywood Bowl season, which is what part of the special.
Yeah.
We just did Albert Hall. We just did the Library of Congress. So this whole dynamic around Henry Mancini has been incredible.
Yeah.
And all the artists.
Full circle special too.
Oh, it's crazy.
That story about him being at the Kennedy
Right.
Center.
Is that crazy? So I just want to make more music, obviously. But it's like, this is a hard act to follow, this one. Right. I mean, I've got, albums lined up, and I'll keep doing my thing. But I love it. I mean, I can't wait to get to work. I can't wait.
So it's really not any one specific goal. It's just
not anymore.
The goal of continuing to do what you love to do.
And having those opportunities and being able to do them. I mean, I guess I can say this, announce it. Well, I got a crazy one.
Please.
Here's the universe doing some crazy shit. So there's a company out of New York called Primary Wave, and they're really big players in the music world. They own the Luther Vandross estate. They own the Bing Crosby estate.
Wow.
They manage our estate, the Mancini family.
Wow.
And they called me about a year ago, and they said, we want to do a new recording of White Christmas using Bing Crosby's original 1942 vocal, and we want to get some huge pop star.
See, I love those crossovers now. It's so
Right.
cool.
Well, but sometimes it's not done all that well.
Right.
So it can't be cool if you get it right. So they said, we want you to produce this, and we need to find a male pop star. So crazy universe. I don't watch TikTok very often, but I happen to be on TikTok this one day. And the Korean boy band called BTS?
Oh, of course.
They're huge.
Huge.
So one of the members, a guy named V, is driving down the street in Seoul with his camera, his iPhone, filming himself lip syncing to Bing Crosby. And I went,
No way.
come on. So I know their publicist. And I called this woman friend of mine. I said, hey, do you think V would want to do a duet with Bing Crosby on White Christmas? And she said, well, yeah. So they called, yeah. So it took me a couple months to get it all done, full orchestra, choir.
That is going to be
And we announced
epic.
it. Let me tell you how epic. We announced it yesterday. It comes out on December 6th. They had 41,000 views of the swag you could buy in 2 hours.
Oh,
And
my
all
God.
Bing and V White Christmas
Talk about
swag
comedy
is
we've
gone.
Never put together in a million years.
Never.
I cannot wait to hear
It
see
works.
that.
It works great. And I was able to, there's no AI involved, but there's technology that allowed me to take off Bing's voice from that recording and now mix it where it sounds like I had Bing in the studio yesterday.
It's so cool.
Yeah. And there's another one that's
What an honor
about to
their
come out.
legacy. How cool is that?
It's cool, to put, BTS on my resume.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? I
Like,
mean,
hello.
come on.
You know that name, don't you?
So Audrey Hepburn sang Moon River in Breakfast at Tiffany's. You remember the famous scene?
course,
She says on the fire escape,
Yeah.
right? So I had this dream to get Gustavo Dudamel, the most famous conductor in the world, with the LA Philharmonic and the LA Master Chorale and Stevie Wonder, and get them all in the studio and have them accompany Audrey Hepburn.
Oh, my God.
So I got permission from Paramount, got the clips of Audrey up on the screen, and then I was able to extract her vocal. So we got rid of the guitar and we got rid of the strings. And I had the most famous session player of them all, Dean Parks, found the guitar that was used in 1960.
gosh.
Yep, he got it, brought it to the session. So it's live with the LA Phil. Anyway, so we recorded it, and I was able to mix Audrey's vocal really up front and for our 2024 ears. And you can go on YouTube right now, and if you type in Moon River, Audrey's Letter, Stevie Wonder, you'll see the whole thing.
It's there.
It's there. And it'll be part of the PBS special. But it's these new things we can do. That technology didn't exist 5 years ago.
But again, kudos to you for adapting. So I am so grateful for all these lessons. I want to wrap it up with something you just made me realize.
Yeah, we're out of time.
No, you've given there's no such thing as out of time with you. We could go for like 12 hours with this guy. Believe me, and you wouldn't get
Please.
bored. It's like there's so much. But something else that's, I suppose, obvious, but I'm realizing is so valuable for people maybe is I think a lot of your success is your amazing ability to bring people together, to be cherished, trusted, loved, whatever you want to say. I mean, more than once you've said, I just called, I knew. That's what makes these things happen. So what's your parting advice for people on how to build, 50 years or whatever it's been of these kind of relationships? What do you attribute that to? Because it's not just being great at what you do. There's plenty of people that are great at what they do and probably can't pick up the phone like you can.
Why would you let somebody else's limitations be yours? See, I taught at USC for 18 years. I had a lot of students, and they would, I stepped down in 1919, felt that way, 1999. And then I actually joined the board in 2006. I've been chairing the music school board, the board of counselors for a long time. Anyway, so I had a lot of experience in academia.
Yeah.
And inevitably, I was teaching drummers, and you'd have 3 drummers of different levels. And, the one guy would say, geez, when I get out of school, by 25, if I don't have it happening because they already have a job and they're 25, and you start living your life by somebody else's measure.
Well said.
So somebody else's limitations, or successes, don't compare yourself to that. One of my teachers said, you get a new Porsche and you got a really beautiful girlfriend and you're driving away from the dealership and you pull up to a stoplight and you look over and there's a guy in a new Ferrari with a girl that you think's prettier than yours. And you go from to shit. So that's the parting thing is it's your path. Pick up the phone and call anybody you want to. And I don't know how much you love them. And, if it's supposed to happen, it's supposed to happen and it will. But don't give up. Just swing. Just keep swinging and trust. If you don't hit the ball, it's fine. If you lose the game, it's all fine. It's all fine.
God, dude, that's so powerful. You are the best.
Hey,
thank you so much.
I love you so much,
Love you,
man. This is so much fun. And you've cooked that lunch today?
That's the least I could do.
Yeah. Well, I'm honored.
Yes.
So
We got to get Monica over here next time.
Absolutely.
Thanks,
Okay.
brother.
Bye, everybody.
You're the best.
Come on. You.